The city of Eastmore wasn't known for its warmth. Steel high-rises pierced the clouds, casting cold shadows over the decaying remains of old neighborhoods. Sirens cried in the distance like lullabies of a place long forgotten, and every alley seemed to whisper stories best left untold. Beneath the crumbling support beams of the Westline overpass, in a corner where sunlight only touched for an hour each day, lived a girl named Raven Holt. At 27, Raven didn't have a house. What she had was a home made from the remnants of what others threw away, corrugated tin patched together with bolts, an old generator that hummed like a sleepy beast, and a workbench salvaged from a junkyard, warped but sturdy. Her haven was lit by a string of yellowed bulbs that ran off a car battery and smelled constantly of motor oil, soldering fumes, and rust. Raven was a mechanic. Not by title, no one had ever given her one, but by necessity, talent, and instinct. She fixed everything. Old fans. Drones. Busted toasters. Broken bicycles. She'd once turned a lawnmower engine into a mini go-kart for a neighborhood kid, and word spread quickly, if it had wires or wheels, the girl under the bridge could bring it back to life. But she didn't talk much. Didn't invite questions. She wore her secrets like she wore her gloves, tight, stained, and always on. That morning was like any other. Raven was elbows deep in the gut of an ancient typewriter she was retrofitting into a printer when she heard the screech of tires. Not uncommon in Eastmore. But what followed made her pause. A sharp crash. Then, crying. She dropped her tools, wiped her hands on her jeans, and stepped into the gray daylight. At the edge of the bridge, not 10 feet from her door, a small child had tipped over in a manual wheelchair. His face was twisted in confusion and panic, his arms flailing against the gravel. The chair itself lay on its side, one wheel still slowly turning. "Hey!" Raven shouted, sprinting over. The boy was maybe 6. Tiny. Freckles scattered across his cheeks like stars. His hands were scraped. His lip was bleeding. His eyes, glassy and blue, blinked at her in shock. "Are you hurt?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He shook his head slowly, lip trembling. I was trying to see the robots." "Robots?" she asked, frowning. "The whirring noises. From your place." Before she could respond, another voice pierced the air. "Leo." A man came barreling down the sidewalk, breath ragged, eyes wild with fear. He wore a long wool coat over a navy suit, and expensive shoes completely unfit for the Eastmore grit. He skidded to a stop beside the boy. "God, Leo, are you okay? I told you to wait in the car. I wanted to see the girl with the cool gadgets," the boy mumbled. The man looked up at Raven, eyes darting between her and the workshop behind her. "You his dad?" Raven asked, sharp. "Yes. Yes. You left him alone? In a car? Near a bridge? I went into the store. I was gone for 2 minutes." "And he rolled across a road and nearly cracked his head open," Raven snapped. "Do you even understand how dangerous this part of the city is?" The man stood, straightening, but his voice was quieter now. I know. It was stupid. I made a mistake." Raven exhaled. "Yeah. You did." Leo tugged on her sleeve. "Is my chair broken?" She turned her attention to the wheelchair. The left wheel had come loose, and the brake lever was bent upward like a crooked finger. "You've done a number on it," she said, inspecting it. "But I think I can fix it. Temporarily." The father knelt down. "How much do you charge?" "Nothing," Raven said. He blinked. "I insist." "I don't." "Not for him." She looked at Leo. "Let's get you off the ground, yeah?" With surprising ease, she lifted the boy into her arms and carried him into her workshop. Inside, the world changed. The dim, sterile world outside gave way to an ecosystem of machinery. Broken clocks ticked in slow rhythm on the walls. Toy drones hung from wires like fruit. Mechanical limbs, built from scrap and imagination, lined the shelves. Leo's eyes lit up like Christmas. "Whoa," he breathed. "This is better than a toy store." Raven chuckled. "Sit there," she said, placing him gently on an old padded chair. She grabbed her toolbox and turned to the man, who stood stiffly at the entrance. "You can come in," she said. "Unless you're afraid of dirt." He hesitated, then stepped in. "I'm, Julian. Julian Wade." "Raven," she replied, already at work. For the next 15 minutes, the workshop was filled with the clinks of tools and Leo's endless questions. "What's that thing do?" "That's a robotic claw." "Why does that fan have wings?" "Because I got bored and gave it dreams." Julian watched, arms crossed, his eyes flicking between the grease-stained woman bent over his son's wheelchair and the boy's beaming face. "You're really good with him," he said after a while. Raven didn't look up. He's curious. That's rare. Most kids stare at screens and forget how to ask questions. Leo fished something out of his coat pocket, a small, folded piece of paper. I drew this, he said. It's you. Raven took it carefully and unfolded it. The drawing showed a girl with wild black hair, golden gloves, and giant ears swirling behind her head. At the top, in shaky letters, it read, "The girl who fixes everything." Her breath hitched. "Thanks," she said softly. "That's really something." She pinned the drawing beside her cluttered workbench, in a small open space between an old calendar and a parts list. Julian watched her, thoughtful. "Do you ever work with kids? Officially, I mean." Raven raised an eyebrow. "Not unless they pay me in candy and robot sketches." He smiled. Leo's aide quit. "And honestly, I haven't found anyone who connects with him like you do. I was wondering if you'd ever consider spending time with him. Maybe just a few hours a week. Tinkering. Teaching. I'm not a babysitter," she said bluntly. "Not asking you to be," Julian said. "Just someone real." She looked at Leo. He was inspecting a wind-up hummingbird, jaw slack with wonder. "Maybe," she said at last. "No promises." Julian nodded. "I'll take maybe." As he handed her a business card and walked out into the dusk, Raven remained standing at the edge of her doorway, fingers brushing the edge of Leo's drawing. She stared at the words again, "The girl who fixes everything." And for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken after all. Maybe she was building. It started with a knock. Not the frantic pounding of police or the slow shuffle of junk traders. Just 3 even, confident knocks on a sheet of rusted metal. Raven slid open the side panel of her workshop to find Julian standing there, this time without the polished shoes or the suit. He wore a plain gray hoodie and jeans that looked a little too clean for Eastmore. And beside him, clutching a plastic toolbox like it was treasure, was Leo. "You said maybe," Julian said. "We came to check on that." Raven hesitated, glancing at Leo, whose smile was already wide and unwavering. She hadn't expected them back. A part of her figured they'd vanish into the world they belonged to, penthouses, therapists, glass elevators. But here they were, back in the belly of the city, under the bones of a broken bridge. "I was in the middle of something," she said. Leo raised the box. "I brought tools." She almost laughed. "Almost. Fine. You can sit at the side bench. Don't touch the welding torch." Leo marched in like a soldier arriving at base camp. Julian followed more cautiously, his eyes adjusting to the dimness, the blinking lights, and the cluttered genius of Raven's space. That afternoon turned into 2. Then 3. Soon, Raven found herself reserving a part of her day for the boy who liked motors more than cartoons. She taught him the difference between torque and traction, how to unscrew a stubborn bolt without stripping it, and how to solder wires using patience instead of pressure. In return, he gifted her with new crayon masterpieces every week. His favorite was one of her fixing the moon with a wrench the size of a train. Julian didn't always stay, sometimes he ducked into work calls outside, but when he did, he watched quietly. His presence never disrupted the rhythm. He'd sit on an old stool near the door, sometimes reading emails, sometimes sipping cheap coffee from her chipped mugs. But mostly, he just observed. One day, as Raven demonstrated how to repurpose an old toaster coil into a heater filament, Leo asked, "Do you live here?" She nodded. "For now. Do you have family?" The question made her pause. "Not really. You can be part of ours," he said, as casually as someone offering a spare slice of pizza. Raven blinked, stunned. Julian looked up from his phone, but said nothing. "I don't think that's how it works, kid," Raven said, forcing a chuckle. "Why not?" She didn't answer. She just handed him a screwdriver and pointed to a circuit board. Later that week, she visited their apartment. Julian had invited her to just stop by, said Leo wanted to show her the new drone they'd bought. Raven agreed, mostly out of curiosity. And maybe a hint of something else. The elevator made her stomach twist. The building was everything she wasn't: polished marble floors, glass walls, potted trees that probably cost more than her entire workshop. She felt the stares of the concierge, the careful distance of the residents in the lobby. Even the air felt expensive. But when Julian opened the door to the penthouse, the first thing she saw was Leo, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by toy gears, bolts, and half-finished robots. "You came," he shouted, launching himself at her and nearly knocking over a plant. She caught him mid-lunge. "Careful, engineer. You break that vase and I'm blaming you." He giggled and led her inside, giving her a tour of what he called the command center. Raven noticed how Julian had transformed part of the living room into a makeshift lab, foldable workbenches, a pegboard with tools, and even a whiteboard labeled Mission Leo, build something awesome. Her heart tightened. They had made space for her world. Julian walked in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Leo insisted on pizza. Hope you like mushrooms. Raven raised a brow. You're asking the girl who's lived off canned chili and vending machine crackers? They ate on the balcony, the city lights sprawling beneath them like stars that had fallen and decided to stay. Leo talked about his next invention, a voice-activated skateboard, and Raven listened intently, offering ideas and gently correcting his wild estimates. When Leo dozed off in a beanbag chair, still mumbling about hover engines, Julian poured them both a glass of ginger ale and leaned on the railing beside her. You've changed him, he said quietly. I didn't do anything magical. You gave him joy. Safety. Confidence. Raven looked away. That's dangerous. Julian frowned. Why? Because it won't last. People like me don't get to keep good things. He was silent for a moment, then said, You keep saying people like me. What does that mean, really? She clenched her jaw. It means my rap sheet's longer than my resume. It means the minute your world really looks at mine, they'll crush it. They always do. Julian took a breath. Then let them try. I've built empires from scratch. But this? What we're building now? It's the first thing that feels like it matters. Raven didn't respond. Her heart was pounding too loudly. He turned to her, voice soft. I'm not asking you to move in. Or give this a name. But Leo. And me. We're better when you're around. She looked at him, at the man who had once bristled at her tone, now speaking to her like she was gravity itself. I'll keep coming, she whispered. For him. And maybe for me? He asked with a tentative smile. Maybe. The next month passed in a blur. Raven taught Leo how to program basic circuits. Julian brought her blueprints from old Skynova projects and asked for her opinion. They took weekend trips to scrapyards and built hover prototypes out of broken parts and faith. She even began designing a custom mobility exosuit for Leo, lightweight, modular, and powered by compressed coil energy. And one Friday evening, as they sat beneath the workbench at her shop, eating takeout and listening to old jazz on a tinny radio, Leo leaned his head on her arm and said, When it's just us, it feels like home. The words froze Raven. She had never had a home. Not a real one. Not until now. She looked across at Julian, who met her eyes with quiet understanding. The gears had turned. Not just in machines. But in their hearts. Raven stood on the rooftop of the Fix-It Forward Center, staring out at the early evening haze as the city buzzed softly beneath her. Things were going well, almost too well. The center, funded by Julian but co-designed by her, had become a haven for kids with disabilities. She taught them how to build small machines, fix their own mobility devices, and most importantly, how to believe in themselves. Eli had blossomed into her little assistant, proudly showing newcomers around, his confidence growing with every project. But peace is fragile, especially when built on a shaky past. That peace shattered one cloudy afternoon when Raven was working on a drone project with Eli in the garage. The clatter of expensive heels on pavement broke the usual quiet. Raven turned, and froze. A woman stood at the edge of the workshop. Early 40s. Designer coat. Red lipstick. Cold eyes. Raven hold, I assume, the woman said, stepping forward with the smooth confidence of someone used to being obeyed. I'm Lena Vollen. Eli's mother. Raven blinked. Julian had said Lena was gone, disappeared after signing away custody years ago. And now, she was here. Real. Uninvited. I see you've made yourself comfortable, Lena continued, glancing around with disdain. Playing house in a junkyard. What do you want? Raven asked calmly. To warn you, Lena said. You don't belong in this world. Not with Julian. Not with my son. He's not your son, Raven said, eyes narrowing. You left him. I'm his mother, Lena snapped. And you're a nobody with a record. Don't think I didn't look you up. Raven stiffened. That past, the one she kept buried under bolts and grease, was crawling back into the light. You think people will let a former thief raise a billionaire's child? Lena sneered. You think investors will stay? The press is already sniffing. One bad headline, and you'll burn everything down. I'm not afraid of you, Raven said. Lena smiled cruelly. Then you're a fool. The next day, headlines exploded online. Tabloids labeled her a gold digger, a street rat, a threat to a corporate empire. Some even hinted Julian was being manipulated by a criminal. Donors to the Fix-It Center began pulling back. Media trucks hovered near the property. Children were pulled out by nervous parents. The dream they had built, brick by brick, was now trembling on the edge. Raven sat alone in her workshop that night, staring at Eli's crayon drawing pinned above her tools. The girl who fixes everything. But this? She couldn't fix this. When Julian arrived later, she handed him a small box, Eli's toy inventions, old sketches, a screwdriver he'd once called magic. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "You can't," Julian pleaded. "She's bluffing. She has power. Money. Lawyers. And I have a record. She'll drag you through court, through headlines, and Eli, he'll be the one who gets hurt. We can fight this," he said. "I won't be the reason he loses stability," Raven whispered. "He deserves better." Julian's voice cracked. "He'll miss you. I'll miss him more." She didn't cry until he left. That night, the garage was silent. Raven sat in the dark, holding the first drawing Eli ever gave her. She traced the words again and again. The girl who fixes everything. But some things, it seemed, were meant to break. The rain hit the city like judgment. Sheets of it poured down Eastmore's cracked streets, flooding gutters and smearing the skyline in watercolor grays. Inside the penthouse, Julian Wade sat on the edge of his son's bed, a knot of fear coiling in his chest. Eli hadn't eaten in 2 days. He wouldn't speak, either. Not even when Julian brought him his favorite robot building kit or promised to take him to the scrapyard again. His small body, once buzzing with ideas and laughter, now lay still beneath the covers, fingers clutching a folded drawing. Julian gently pulled it loose and unfolded it with trembling hands. A crude picture, drawn in crayon. A girl with wild black hair, golden gloves, and wings made of gears. Above it, in a child's shaky scrawl. "If Miss Raven doesn't come back, I don't want anything." Julian stood abruptly. Anger, grief, desperation, he didn't know which was louder. He grabbed his coat and keys, ignoring the warnings from his security detail. The storm outside wasn't half as wild as the one tearing through his home. He drove recklessly through slick streets, tires hissing over rain-drenched asphalt. When he reached the workshop, he didn't even knock. He pounded. "Raven," he shouted over the thunder. "Open the door. Please." The door creaked open a moment later. Raven stood there, barefoot in an oversized sweater, dark circles under her eyes, her expression dazed. "Julian?" she said, stunned. "What are you?" He stepped forward, soaked and shaking. "It's Eli. He's not eating. He's shutting down. He wrote a note, he thinks losing you is the end of everything." Raven's breath caught. Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the drawing, already damp from the storm. Her eyes scanned the page, and her knees nearly gave way. "I thought leaving was the right thing," she whispered, voice cracking. "I thought I was protecting him." Julian took her hand, held it tight. "You are what protects him." She sobbed, then fell into his arms, letting the storm soak them both. "I'm coming home," she whispered. "I'm not leaving him again." An hour later, Raven entered the penthouse quietly. Eli's room was dim, filled with the low hum of a small bedside fan. She walked slowly to his bed and knelt beside him. "Hey, little man," she whispered. He stirred. "Miss Raven?" "I'm here," she said, brushing damp curls from his forehead. His eyes opened fully, shining with tears. He reached for her. "I missed you," he choked. "I missed you more," she said, gathering him into her arms. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Julian stood in the doorway, watching as color began returning to his son's face. And in that moment, the pieces of their broken little family clicked back into place. The days that followed were turbulent. Though Raven had returned, the media storm hadn't passed. In fact, it intensified. A paparazzi photo of her stepping out of Julian's car, Eli asleep in her arms, had ignited another firestorm. Tabloids labeled her everything from the con queen of compassion to the street rat who stole a CEO's heart. Talk shows debated Julian's judgment, questioned Raven's intentions, and speculated about her agenda. One morning, Raven stood in the Fix-It Center's bathroom, reading headlines on her phone. Wade's empire at risk? The woman who could destroy Sky Nova. Ex-convict living with billionaire and child. Her hands shook. The old shame, dormant for so long, rose like bile in her throat. She hadn't run. Not this time. But it still hurt. It hurt worse when Lena returned, dressed not in luxury but in litigation. This time, she brought legal documents. Custody petitions. Claims of neglect. "You should have stayed gone," Lena hissed as she cornered Raven behind the center. "I told you what would happen. Now I'm making good on it." "You never wanted him," Raven said, voice low. "Well, now I do," Lena replied. "Or at least, I want control. And you're the easiest way to get it." But fate, it seemed, was done favoring her. Because Julian appeared moments later, Eli by his side in his wheelchair. And for the first time in months, Eli spoke for himself. "I don't want you," he said to Lena, his voice clear and steady. "I don't love you like I love her." Lena's confidence faltered. "I want to stay with Dad. And Miss Raven. They make me feel like I matter." Julian stepped forward, eyes blazing. "If you push this, I'll take it public. I'll show every message, every document. You'll lose again, Lena. And this time, the whole world will see you for what you are." She said nothing. Just gave them one last bitter glare before leaving for good. But even with her gone, the media didn't stop. They questioned Julian's stability, Raven's motivations, and the wisdom of putting a child in the care of a woman with a record. That night, Raven sat on the fire escape with a packed bag by her side. Julian found her there, silent, staring into the wind. "I can't stay," she said. "Not if they're going to keep attacking you." "Eli. You're not leaving," he replied. "I can't watch them twist every truth into a weapon." Julian knelt beside her. "Do you love him?" he asked. Tears filled her eyes. "With everything I am." "And me?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. Then let me protect you. Let me fight back." The next morning, Julian did just that. He appeared on national television, wearing a calm, unwavering expression. The host grilled him about the controversy, the relationship, the risks. Julian waited for her to finish, then looked directly into the camera. "Her name is Raven Holt," he said. "And if you're looking for scandal, look elsewhere. She's the reason my son can smile again. She's the one who stayed when things got hard. She's the one who gave him hope." He paused. "She's also the woman I love." Gasps echoed across the studio. "I don't care about the past. I care about who she is. And if you think a few headlines will scare me away from protecting what we've built, you've never met Raven." The internet exploded. Within hours, hashtags like #StandWithRaven and #FixItWithLove were trending. Parents of kids with disabilities posted stories of how Raven inspired their children. Former foster kids wrote about the girl under the bridge who used to fix their toys, or sit beside them on nights they felt invisible. Lena, sensing the shift in public favor, quietly withdrew her case. Raven watched the broadcast from the center, tears running down her cheeks. Not because Julian defended her, but because he believed in her, in who she had become, not just who she'd been. That night, Julian and Eli returned. Eli sprinted to her, throwing his arms around her legs. Julian followed, wrapping them both in a tight embrace. "We're not going anywhere," he whispered. And for the first time, Raven believed it. Not as a mechanic. Not as a survivor. But as a woman who had finally found what she'd been fixing her whole life to find. A future. Spring rolled into Eastmore with quiet gentleness, like a breath finally being released after a long-held storm. The streets still bore the city's usual scars, cracks, rust, graffiti, but in the corner beneath the old Westline overpass, something extraordinary had bloomed. What was once Raven Holt's humble workshop was now the Fix-It Forward Center, a beacon of grit, imagination, and second chances. The walls, once corrugated metal patched with tape, were now painted with murals of gears, stars, and hopeful hands. The space buzzed with energy, kids in wheelchairs tinkering with motors, others assembling custom walkers, all guided by one woman who had once believed she was unworthy of anything good. But everything had changed. And it all began with a broken wheelchair. A year had passed since Raven returned, since she chose to fight, to stay, to believe. And now, surrounded by the laughter of children and the steady hand of Julian Wade beside her, she was no longer the girl under the bridge. She was something else entirely. She was home. The wedding was simple. Just as Raven wanted. No extravagant gowns, no sweeping venues. Just love, laughter, and a handmade wooden arch in the garden behind the center, built by Eli and Julian themselves. Wildflowers spilled over its beams, and sunlight filtered through the trees like blessings. Raven wore a lace dress borrowed from a friend, her hair loosely braided with tiny white daisies tucked into the strands. Julian wore his sleeves rolled up, his hands calloused from days helping Eli install the center's new solar array. He hadn't looked this human, this at ease, since the day she met him. Eli, now 6, walked slowly down the aisle on his own two legs, using the custom walker he and Raven had built together. It gleamed silver in the light, with his name etched into the side in bold, block letters. His face was beaming. "I got the rings," he said proudly, holding up a small tin box. "Try not to drop them," Raven whispered as he passed. "I got it," he grinned. When it came time for vows, Julian's voice cracked more than once. "I spent years building empires that looked perfect," he said, taking her hands. "But I didn't know what perfect meant until you walked into our lives. You didn't just fix my son's wheelchair. You fixed our hearts." Raven exhaled shakily. "I never thought I'd be part of something whole," she said, her voice strong but tearful. "But now, standing here, I finally believe I belong. Not because I've earned it, but because you, both of you, saw something in me I didn't know was there." When they kissed, Eli clapped louder than anyone. And when they walked back down the aisle, the sun seemed to shine just a little brighter. In the months that followed, life settled into a new kind of beautiful rhythm. Mornings started early, often with Eli bouncing into their bedroom carrying blueprints for his latest invention. Some days it was a robotic dog feeder, others, a self-watering plant stand. Raven always made time to help him sketch it out, no matter how wild the idea. Julian split his days between Sky Nova's upper-floor boardrooms and the ground floor of the Fix-It Center, often showing up in slacks and a smudge of oil on his cheek. He didn't mind the mess anymore. Not when it came from joy. The Fix-It Forward Center flourished. They offered free workshops for kids with disabilities. Taught coding, mechanical design, and basic repair. Raven ran her sessions like a masterclass in both invention and heart, showing her students that mistakes weren't failures, just part of the build. "Every broken thing," she would say, holding up a snapped wire or shattered bolt, "has the potential to be something new. You just have to believe it's worth fixing." Eli became the unofficial mascot of the center. He greeted every new kid like an old friend, rolled around with tool belts slung across his chest, and helped translate Raven's more complex lectures into kid language. "My mom can fix anything," he'd proudly say. "Even if you think it's beyond saving." Donations flooded in. Parents volunteered. Even media outlets that had once smeared Raven's name now called her a local hero. They ran headlines like, "From Forgotten to Fearless, the woman who rewired her future." The Fix-It Center turns disability into innovation. Mechanic turned mentor transforms Eastmore. But Raven never let it get to her head. Fame wasn't the goal. Healing was. And healing, she learned, didn't happen in silence, it happened in community. One evening, as the sky blushed pink and gold, Raven sat on the back steps of the center with Julian. They watched as Eli raced a remote-controlled hoverboard across the garden, laughing wildly. "You ever think about how all this started?" Julian asked, sipping iced tea. "Every day," Raven said. "I think about that busted chair. About yelling at you in the rain. About how close I was to walking away." "You almost did," he murmured. "I was scared." Julian reached for her hand. "And you stayed anyway. That's what matters." Raven leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes on the sky. "It still scares me sometimes. Being happy. Like it'll be taken the moment I trust it." "It won't," he said. "Not this time." A moment passed before Eli wandered over, holding something behind his back. "What do you got there, buddy?" Julian asked. Eli grinned and revealed a small gear necklace, roughly cut, strung on twine. "I made it today," he said, offering it to Raven. "You're always helping us build stuff. So, I thought I'd build something for you." Raven took it slowly, her eyes shimmering. The gear had been etched, sloppily, but lovingly, with the words, "Still fixing." She looked up at him. "It's perfect." That night, the three of them curled up in the living room, Julian reading aloud from an old sci-fi novel, Eli dozing with his head on Raven's lap. The city buzzed outside, but inside, there was only peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. Messy. Flawed. Beautiful. A family, not made of blood, but of bolts and belief. And as Raven looked down at the boy who'd once tipped his wheelchair outside her workshop and the man who had given her the space to grow, she smiled. She hadn't just rebuilt her life. She'd helped build something stronger than steel. A home. A future. A forever.